That'd be a good deal. Yeah. It is, yeah, it's okay. You're the
Yeah.
So,
How about that?
before we dive into the grandfathering and other types of subsidies, I did want to go over this just to begin to orient you guys to reading a client's flood insurance declaration page. So this is called the declaration page. You're going to ask your clients to see their declaration page to find out whether there are ways that they could be saving money now. And I just highlighted a few that were relevant in the case of this particular client. If you look at the first section in the middle, it says insured's primary residence N. That told me that this is being rated as if it were a rental home property. The rates are more expensive for a rental home. So you always want to check that when you're looking at a client's declaration page. And make sure if it's the client's primary residence, yes. And that means, you know, they live on one floor, rent out another floor, that's still their primary residence. The other thing is that this is a pre-firm subsidized policy, and the way you know that is because it says it in small type in the middle of the page. No client's ever going to be able to find that, so you're going to help them determine that they have the subsidized rate, and then if that's cheaper than what you calculate the standard rate to be, then, you know, again, they need to get their elevation certificate to their flood insurance broker as fast as possible. Okay, then also, let's just have a quick look at the elevation certificate, because this is going to be a wealth of information that your clients are going to get. One thing though, if you're talking to clients generally outside of RTAPP, some people have the idea that elevation certificates expire, because if you look up in the top corner, it says expiration date July 31st, 2015. That just refers to the form. They've issued a new form. The elevation certificate is still good, so nobody's elevation certificate expires. The only way that it would expire is because they change their home to like elevate the first floor or whatever it is. Then they need a new elevation certificate. But if they've got an elevation certificate dating back years and years, it's still valid, doesn't expire.
So that expiration date is because of the form.
Yeah, they issued FEMA.
So why didn't they just put the word form expiration date?
OMB,
You know, to not confuse the client.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah.
that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, I've had a lot of people, when I've asked them if they got an elevation certificate, they say, yeah, but it's expired. All right, so this tells you, you know, basically, if you look at line A7, the building number, actually, let's look back to that slide here. Okay, and on line A7, building diagram number, it says is 9. This is where you're going to look at your lowest floor guide and say, oh, this is a building with a subgrade crawl space in it, right? That tells you right off the bat what you're dealing with in terms of the house. Now, if that is wrong, yeah?
I'm sorry. Is this automatically given to the homeowner, or what do they have to do to say I got an elevation certificate?
Normally you have to purchase it from a surveyor or an engineer. It's something you have to pay somebody to do, and right now it costs about $1,000.
What?
Yeah, but the
And
art.
you put the word form expiration and then you charge them $1,000? I'm sorry. I'm just a pre-person account. I'm saying you gotta be kidding me.
Yeah, it's frustrating. But everybody in the RTAPP program gets one of these. So this is like one of the most valuable walk-away pieces that your clients are going to get from RTAPP, and why, you know, even if clients can't afford any mitigation, they should go. They sign up for RTAPP just to get this elevation certificate for free. So your clients will already have this, but for your other clients, it costs about $1,000. And the only reason to invest in that is if it's going to save you more than that in the flood insurance reduction, and for some people it will, particularly in this having to do with this thing called a LOMA. But that LOMA is kind of this magic bullet that we'll talk about later.
What do you have to do to be qualified to take that $1,000?
To take the $1,000, I don't know. You gotta know how to fill one of these out. You have to use one of
Fill out a
those,
form.
like you have to measure heights relative to sea level using certain neighborhood benchmarks, apparently. I mean, this is something actually that we could, you know, as advocates, start trying to get available pro bono. I know for a while in Staten Island, when I was working out there, there was a professor at College of Staten Island in the engineering department who was doing this for free on weekends for people after Sandy, going around.
I'm from Staten Island, that's how they do, that's how we do this. That's how we do, you see how we treat people? Staten Island. Okay?
So, you know, if we could find more low-cost, not-for-profit ways to get people this document, that would help a lot too. The other way people can get it was by signing up for the studies, the city's flood insurance affordability study, but that's over now too. So. All right, so this is the $1,000 document. It's first it shows you the. Sometimes they have more pages to justify it, but everything you need to know is here. So it tells you building diagram 9. Again, you know that this is the type of building. If it's not, if your client says, no, I don't have that, I have, you know, whatever, that's something you want to investigate whether correcting that error will save your client money. If correcting it is not going to save your client money, then you have to think about like leaving well enough alone in terms of an error. But then if you, you know, and it tells you the flood zone in box B8 and B9, you have to pay attention, and I'll tell you later when, but you have to pay attention to B11 to make sure that you're using the same elevation standard. There's 2 ways of measuring elevation above sea level, and B11 is going to tell you which way they use. You have to make sure you're not comparing apples and oranges when you're using these measurements. Then if you go down to C2, this is where all the meat is in the elevation certificate. So C2A, remember that diagram with C2A, C2A, C2A? That is the top of the bottom floor, including basement, crawl space, or enclosure. So this person's bottom floor is 7.5 feet above sea level. The top of the next higher floor is 11.27. So again, so if it was, you know, let me go to a more relevant document. So, you know, let's say it's so that let's say it's something like this. This is 7.5. This measurement up here is 11.27. That's going to tip you off whether this is a basement or a crawl space or an enclosure, right? Because if it's under a regular story height, then you know you're dealing with something other than a regular story. And then you're going to skip all the rest of that until you get to E, the lowest elevation of the machinery or equipment servicing the building, 11.27. So that's good. Her machinery is up here, it's not down there. That's going to help her a little bit in terms of rating. C2F, lowest adjacent grade, LAG, this is ground level. This is the key measurement that you need to know, 10.51. So if you look here, her first floor above that, whatever it is, what did we decide it was? It's a basement, right? Her first floor above that is above the base flood elevation. So C2F is the ground level. Don't pay any attention to G and H, but that's where you're going to get your relevant numbers from. We'll go through that in a lot more detail later. All right, so anything before we move on to subsidies?
Just one thing.
Yeah.
You said in smart school for making sure that, you know, comparing apples to apples. The NGVD.
Yeah.
That you have checked up there. What's that stand?
NGVD is the 1929 something like nautical vertical datum something or other. And then there's NAVD, which is the more current one. The VD part stands for vertical datum, that's all I know.
Gotcha.
But,
So which one are we using now? The first one?
we're using NAVD
Okay.
now, so like all the information you're gonna get off of Flood Help NY about the zone and the base flood elevation is NAVD.
Gotcha.
If you're dealing with an older elevation certificate, or even the newer ones, sometimes they're using NGVD, then you're gonna have to do a conversion, but we'll talk about
Understood.
what
Thank
that is, yeah. Yeah, but NAVD is the current one. If NGVD is checked in the relevant box, and you'll see there's a few places where they can say, specify, then you're gonna have to do a conversion.
I have a question.
Yeah,
So it is checked here, but then on the bottom C section, they talk about the NAVD.
yep,
But in the B section, it's checked off the
It should
NG.
1988 as opposed to 1928.
yep. So they're saying, for determining in line B11, when they set the BFE, which is in box B9,
Mhm.
they used NGVD 1929
Okay, to come to that assessment.
to come to that 10 feet in the base flood elevation.
Okay.
Then, in the middle one, under C2, where it says benchmark utilized vertical datum, they say NAVD, saying
1988.
that the 1988, the benchmark that they used with their, what are those things called? It's not Stenson, but it's something sextant, whatever their measuring device is. They used a benchmark that's rated as NAVD 1988. But then what they did is they converted it for you so that they would have apples to apples. Because if you look right below that, indicate the datum used for elevation in items A through H below, they went back to NGVD.
Right, to bring it back to what it was in the beginning.
Yeah, so it compares with B9, so that the numbers in C2 compare with B9. It would have been much better if they put B9 in NAVD and everything else
Right.
in NAVD, but
Right.
for some reason the survey.
But this is legit though, this
Yeah.
will be proper.
Yes,
Okay.
So it's National Geodetic Vertical Datum,
okay,
and the other one is North
God, I love
America.
Google.
North America Vertical Datum.
okay,
So basically, it's like how they measure the sea level using, in North America, basically. So the datum is their unit of measurement, I guess.
right, yeah.
So it's
And the
vertical
reason that this is complicated is because sea level isn't static, right?
Yes.
Sea level
Right.
goes up and down, so they had to pick some kind of like, what time of day or what point on the earth are we gonna measure it,
From, yes.
so, yeah.
Oh, Lord.
I just want to know why
That's what I was going to say, moon, right, because sea level rise, we're full moon.
Okay, subsidies. For this part, you want to pull out this thing, Advocate's Guide to Advising Clients on Flood Insurance. 'Cause you're going to find a lot more information about these subsidies than is just on the screen here. All right, so I'm going to run through them, but you'll see there's kind of a summary on the first page that gives page number references to where in the flood insurance manual you're going to find this stuff. Flood insurance manual is a huge document, and we'll deal with that later. But if you need to look something up, you want to go straight to the source. These are the pages where you're going to look it up. And then if you go forward to page 6 through
Let me ask, does this also affect condominiums or like buildings?
6 through 12. Oh, you had to ask about condominiums.
Don't go there right now.
Not your
But
depressed
it gets worse when you get to co-ops.
in condos per se.
Yeah.
Condos
Condos-
are not that bad, co-ops are an utter and complete.
Yeah,
Because you don't own it
Yes.
outright, so things get kind of sticky.
Right.
National
So
Flood Insurance
yeah.
Program does not know how to write a co-op.
Yeah, so it's very hard for co-op owners to get coverage on the building. For condo owners, the condo association normally would buy a policy to cover the building.
Right.
The individual owner can cover the building and the contents with a separate policy, but the rating is entirely different. If you get a client who has a condo, then yeah, call me or something.
I was already at your speed dial already. Relax.
Yeah, and and I'll probably like tell you, look, I don't even know
It's
how
not
to do
gonna
that, so.
happen.
Condos are,
Fair enough,
yeah.
fair enough.
We got a guy.
You got a condo guy? All right, call Beth, she's got a condo.
That's the family, we got that.
Okay, so again, so the detail on the subsidies is page 6 through 12, but the high-level overview of the subsidies. First is preferred risk rate, and the key to remember here, and again, it's in the material, so you don't have to memorize it or write it down right now. This is only available to people in an X zone. You cannot grandfather into this. If you're grandfathering in a way to stay in your zone, you can't get this. It's only available in an X zone, and it's only available if basically you've only ever gotten one flood damage payment over $1,000, whether it's from flood insurance or FEMA or Build It Back or anything. So most of your clients have already spent their one ticket. So they may still be in the preferred risk rate if they're in the X zone. If they have another flood and they get paid $1,000 by any federal agency, including the National Flood Insurance Program, they lose the preferred risk rate. So yeah, I mean, they may have to buy insurance and never use it in order not to see dramatic increases. The preferred risk rate comes in between like $400 and $500, about that, maybe up to $600 in some cases, but it's really cheap. People misunderstand grandfathering to apply to the preferred risk rate too. There are a lot of homeowners who have heard about grandfathering. They're currently in an X zone. They're paying $500. They think, well, it doesn't matter if I get mapped to an A zone because I'm going to keep, I can grandfather. You can't grandfather into the preferred risk. They're going to be paying standard X zone rates, which are much higher, as you'll see in a minute. Okay, preferred risk rate, though, remember that's just for X zone people. Grandfathering. There are two kinds of grandfathering: continuous coverage grandfathering or built-in compliance grandfathering. The first one. So basically what grandfathering does is if you have flood insurance before the maps change, which is now, we're looking at probably like 3 to 5 years out, maybe longer. If you have flood insurance before that, the maps change, grandfathering allows you to either keep your old zone, if you were X going to AE, or if you are AE going to VE, you can keep your old zone, or let's say you're already in AE, you can keep your old base flood elevation. So again, if you're this guy, it doesn't matter whether he stays in his zone, but if he grandfathers, he keeps this 9-foot base flood elevation rather than going up to the 13-foot base flood elevation. So grandfathering allows you to get rated basically under the old maps. Grandfathering is tenuous though. It's easy to lose. If once you lose it, it's gone forever. You and any subsequent owner can never get it back, and also Congress could take it away at any time. They tried to do that in 2012 with the Bigger Waters Act, and then the HFIAA largely restored grandfathering. But they could change their mind again because FEMA is $28 billion. Beth, how many dollars is FEMA in debt? Something like $28 billion.
I'm sorry, in what?
In the red. FEMA it has gone into massive debt
Oh,
starting with
yeah, no, they're
Katrina.
approximately $28 billion in debt to the U.S. Treasury.
Yeah. So Katrina started it, and then Sandy sort of was.
Well, actually, there were 5 major East Coast storms in the year of Katrina. Katrina was like fourth out of the 5.
Yeah.
And all the subsidized premiums, subsidized policies are concentrated on the East Coast because we have the older buildings. This program wasn't created until 1978. So that's one of the reasons why the subsidies, removal of the subsidies hit our area so hard, because of the 4% of the policies that have subsidized rate, 98% of them are on the East Coast.
Yeah. Yeah, so and like 80% of our building stock is older.
Yeah.
Okay, so grandfathering generally means you can keep your old BFE or you keep your old zone if you qualify and if Congress doesn't take it away. So again, this is something clients may be able to fall back on. It's never anybody's first choice is to rely on grandfathering because it's tenuous. Okay, so continuous coverage grandfathering, and this is discussed on page 2 and then page 9 you said? Yeah. So basically, continuous coverage means roughly what it says is that there has never been a lapse in the policy. This applies, the measurement of lapse starts from the first time that property was ever purchased flood insurance. That may be a prior owner. So this is something that clients are not going to know, and therefore, should not be relying on grandfathering if it's continuous coverage. If a prior owner let the policy lapse, and then when you bought it, you bought flood insurance and kept it continuous, you can't grandfather because that prior owner let it lapse, right? So it counts from when the building was first rated, and that makes it hard for clients to know. Theoretically, their flood insurance broker should be able to tell them whether the building has had continuous coverage, but flood insurance brokers, as you will learn, don't know this program very well and don't answer questions very well. All right, so again, continuous coverage is great if you have never had a lapse in the past, which may have been as a result of a foreclosure or a mortgage default, and you never have a lapse in the future. So again, if a lot of people fall on temporary hard times, if they have a mortgage and their mortgage company doesn't step in to fill the gap, which they often do, if that policy lapses, grandfathering is gone forever.
So if we're talking to clients, not to say you've never lapsed, but if the coverage for the house has never lapsed.
Yep.
Let's say the house goes back to 2080.
Yep. Yeah.
Right, you the property.
Right. So, I mean, you can use it to eliminate the option, right? If they say my policy lapsed after Sandy or whatever, but you can't necessarily give anybody the assurance that they will be able to grandfather under continuous coverage. All right, so that's continuous coverage grandfathering. Built-in compliance grandfathering is only applies to post-firm houses. Houses that were built after the first firm flood insurance rate map was adopted. So post-1983, anything built after November 16th, 1983. If you get into a situation where they started construction but they didn't finish construction and it's straddling the border, just call me because there are answers to those questions, but you need to learn where to find them. Built-in compliance means that the home was built in compliance with the flood insurance rate map in existence at the time that it was built. So that's why it only applies to post-1983 houses, because there was no firm before that. There was nothing to build in compliance with. So it's just irrelevant. And since we've only had one firm ever in New York City, there's only one date that matters, which is the 1983 date. If this home was built as an elevated home, if it's in a flood zone, was built as many homes were, with a garage underneath and living quarters above, and it was in compliance with the base flood elevation, they can get built-in compliance coverage regardless of lapse. And they can get it at any time. There's no you have to buy it by this date or by that date before the maps change, after they change. That doesn't apply. What you'll run into in this situation, though, is houses that have been converted. I'm sure all of you have had clients who, their first floor has a garage door on the front, but it has long stopped being a garage.
It became an apartment.
What?
It became an apartment.
Became an apartment, or it became bedrooms and a kitchen, or it became whatever people need space for. So that's not going to qualify unless they want to restore it to the way it was before. All right, grandfathering. So grandfathering is really important, but again, in order to grandfather under continuous coverage, they have got to have a policy before those maps change. So, you know, for people in an X zone, they should buy it now because it's going to be cheap. For people in an AE zone who are going to have affordability issues, you know, they may need to start thinking about kind of brinksmanship, but tell them that, you know, it's actually absolutely critical that they have that policy before the maps change. All right, the pre-firm subsidized rates we've talked about already. Again, that's for the pre-firm homes, pre-1983 homes, and it's phasing out in 15 to 18% increments until the rate hits the full risk rate. Newly mapped is a new, also temporary subsidy, and it's similar to grandfathering, but not exactly the same. People who are newly mapped into a flood zone or into a higher flood zone from an AE to a BE have the option of getting this newly mapped subsidy if they either buy flood insurance before the map changes or buy flood insurance within a certain number of months after. Now, the statute looks like it's 12, but then if you take, if 12 months, but if you factor in the lag in terms of a policy taking effect, I think the last I calculated was down to like 10. Do you know exactly how many months after the?
No, because of the, again, I would say, I would go with 10, but everything is subject to change, so just get them in now.
Yeah.
Get them in now.
Yeah.
Because the risk is real now.
Yeah, yeah, right. And if you can get flood insurance for $500 now, most people can afford that.
Yeah. And again, I guess when we do more about the counseling, we're talking about buying at full coverage on these examples that you're giving. And there's going to be some wiggle room in terms of that. You have to be very careful about that, and also about the deductibles.
Yeah.
And how that's going to be.
Right, so you can reduce coverage and you can increase deductibles.
We're talking, everybody really want to understand the impacts that's going to have before you recommend it.
Yeah.
There's just no way around the fact that it's complicated.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused with the grandfathering thing.
Okay.
I know.
I'm not surprised because it took me about 2 years to figure it out, but.
Yeah, because I'm speaking to Beth, I know, you know, when we have discussions about where people are today and where it's going to be later down the road, we're saying if they have that moderate risk premium of say $500, when the new prices come into effect, they can keep those rates.
When the new
That-
map
that-
changes.
When this, well, the new map changes, so therefore new rates, right?
It's
Can
not
they
so much
keep-
that the rate
yeah, it's not the
changes,
rate.
it's that because you're in potentially a worse zone with a higher BFE, your premium, yeah, the rate that applies to your policy is gonna go up because
Right.
you're at a lower elevation relative to where you need to be, yeah.
So if you have that moderate risks now,
Yeah,
do you keep that or do you have to increase the premium that you're paying?
no, keep that,
You can keep that?
Yeah.
You're going to
Okay.
keep that rating category,
Mhm.
okay? It won't be called X, it'll be called something else, of course. You will still see increases in premium
Regardless.
based on the run-up to the eventual actuarially sound risk rate. It's just going to take you longer to get there because you're starting at a lower rate.
So and maybe this won't apply to the clients that we will be counseling, but what about people who are borderline, right? So they're not in the risk, but they're right there.
right on the edge of the
Right on
special
the edge, right. So-
flood hazard zone.
What do
Yeah.
you recommend for those people?
I think, you know, if they're on the X half of the border, then they should expect that they're gonna be in the A
They're gonna be
in the
put into
future.
that zone.
No,
But
if
they're
on the
moving that
preliminary maps, if
Yeah.
they're on the line, okay, what I tell people is Mother Nature doesn't read maps.
Right.
You will not be required, you will not trigger the federal requirement to purchase a flood policy. But Mother Nature does not read maps. And you will have a lower risk, a lower rate, because you're not going to be in the high risk zone. But you are, I mean, literally, we have people who are one house down.
Yeah.
Should they have
I mean, and
a flood
Sandy,
This is why when
Sandy
we talk
flooded
about
way
you
into
need
the
a flood
Exxon,
policy, or
right?
you
So-
should have a flood policy.
Yeah.
Those words have to be very carefully bracketed with the understanding of the reality of the risk, not just the financial implications of mapping and flood insurance.
Right, yeah, so anybody who can have flood insurance should have flood insurance because it's a support protection.
Okay.
So, yeah, go
Last
ahead,
thing,
yeah.
Property values. So we're talking about the case where it was a basement, now it's bedrooms or a kitchen or an apartment, whatever. If the person has done those improvements and now they purchased the house with those improvements.
Yeah.
And the property value has been assessed here and say their mortgage is based on that assessment.
Yeah.
Now you're talking about filling in that basement or, significantly altering that space.
Yes,
That can affect the property value. Then
Yes.
we're telling people that they have the option of putting themselves in a position to have their mortgage go to whatever,
Or just lose
Yep.
it.
or just lose the value. They put it in for 20 years.
these are not easy decisions you're counseling people on. These are really hard decisions with serious consequences,
And the basement apartments that people use to subsidize their mortgage, okay? If that house is going into a high-risk floodplain, they are basing their mortgage on the risk of drowning their tenants. There should not be a basement apartment. And if that doesn't support you, if you can't support your mortgage without that rental, then you need to think about what you can do about getting out from under that house, because you cannot counsel people to put people at risk.
But my mortgage broker, my real estate agent,
No, it's not even that, not the breaking
estimated
too.
my,
Not even-
estimated my purchasing power based on,
Yes.
not saying when they come to us, I'm
Some
saying.
of these houses are gonna go underwater based on these
Yeah,
concepts.
And
but then you have-
that's where it's.
However, remember, in terms of equity and the ability to sell the house, if they're not resilient, they're going to take at least $100,000 hit to their equity.
You got a lot of first-time home buyers to where you gotta understand these people are talking like it's the last thing in their lives if they don't buy a house. And they're looking at this rental income, like they're gonna get that two-family house, it's a hell of a high point.
Yeah.
Most of them come through my door, they talk, the first thing they say is free money. They're not even talking about what they have.
Yeah.
So this right here, this is, and most of them are looking at buying in places like Queens. Most of them are looking at that, not even Far Rockaway, like, over there by, Bell Parkway area.
Yes.
By Olive Garden and behind that area.
Yes.
They're gonna get slammed, and they can't afford to buy inland off of that map. So at the end of the day, we're advocating home ownership, we're throwing all this free money. They're out there shopping in all of these high-prone areas because, just like you said, Mother Nature don't read maps. These are gonna be our victims, so you better hold this style coming your way because this is what's gonna happen. And it's just ridiculous that, I don't know about, this is something.
Well, as my
Government has to change the
son-in-law,
rules.
the
It's just
anthropologist said,
ridiculous.
everybody gives you a simple answer to a complex question.
Somebody
They're
gotta change
lying.
the rules.
Okay?
Well, I mean,
Just as we
the problem is-
rebuilt New York City in the last 20 years,
I get
we're
it.
going to rebuild coastal New York in the next 20 years.
I mean, and the thing is, it's not just FEMA, right? It's flooding, right?
Exactly.
I mean, flooding is so expensive, right? And a lot of the country doesn't want to keep paying to repair flood damage.
So now they put
And
that on the homeowners.
if we were starting from scratch and we could not build anything in those areas, that's a solution. It's not a solution when you've already built there and when the people who live there are mostly poor people, which is true all over the country, right? So there are other solutions, and I think one of the most important ones is income-based flood insurance subsidies, right? FEMA can do that. Right now, they subsidize a whole range of policies. They could convert to an income-based subsidy, so that if you can't afford your flood insurance, you get a subsidy. If you can't afford $5,000, $6,000, you pay that. That's another solution we can think about, but again, that takes political pressure.
Yeah, because FEMA can't do anything that the Congress doesn't approve.
True.
The flood program is a disaster recovery program, not an insurance program, and it is written by Congress. They screwed it up really badly with BW 12, and HIFIA is simply a holding pattern till we figure this out.
Well, let's see what we can do.
Yeah,
Let's see what we can do.
well, this is going to be the advocacy program for community-based organizations.
This is where the
Build
sector comes
a
in.
dike,
Huh?
buy the house and just build the dike.
You build a 25-foot wall, build a big wall, and have the ocean pay
A
for
dike
it.
and
That's
put
right.
a
We're gonna talk
highway
about building
over
a
it.
wall.
I mean, let's let
I've been to
them
New
work
Orleans.
quick.
You have
There's money there, they're still
solution
there.
to a complex problem,
There's-
you're looking at a lot.
All right, you know, we can talk about the politics of it next week, because I do like to talk about it. Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see
I
if
just
this
wanted
now.
to close that because I'm like, as we're talking about it, I'm having all these issues coming up. And remember that when we were working with the coalition in Canarsie, one of the reasoning was as well is to build a barrier in the bay to protect it. So as much as we're putting ownership on the homeowners, I think like we also have to be advocating on the political front to have those barriers because at the end of the day, we're still gonna have flooding.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the
It's
problems
resistant.
with the barriers though is they can be deadly, and Midland Beach is the example of what happens, right? So they raised a road, Father Capodanno, Sandy breached that, the water came in faster than you can imagine
Yeah.
into Midland Beach and killed a lot of, and it didn't leave, right? So, I mean, a client talked about an 8-foot wall of water chasing him down the
That's
street.
exactly what happened.
That's deadly, so it's complicated,
These hard
right?
solutions and soft solutions are extremely complex. We need to understand and advocate around them for our neighborhoods. But this is not what we need to do right now, because we need to have a 4-day symposium on this.
Now, I'm sure you understand that the village has lived under below seawater level for decades, and they have survived by the big flood of 1952 by building dike, and they're still right now over there. But now, a question though, if somebody can buy the flood insurance, right? They don't have mortgage issue, they buy the house, so do they still have to do the elevation? Let's say I can pay whatever, do I still have to get an elevation and then let my insurance take care of it?
No, if they do the elevation, then they'll reduce the cost of their flood insurance. So if they don't have, you know, if they didn't get FEMA, build it back, SBA,